Sarah Chen stood in her workshop aboard the orbital station Harmony 7, surrounded by the comfortable chaos of partially dismantled machinery. The space was filled with everything from ancient Earth combustion engines to malfunctioning colonial terraforming units. Each piece told its own story of human ingenuity and persistence, stories that Sarah could read in every scratch, weld, and patch. The message that flickered across her diagnostic tablet was unlike anything she'd seen before. The characters shifted and changed, almost organic in their movement, before finally resolving into standard English. Human mechanical specialist required. Matter of galactic significance. Payment negotiable. Sarah brushed a lock of graying hair from her face, leaving a streak of carbon residue across her forehead. In 15 years of running her independent repair service, she'd never received a message that managed to bypass Harmony 7's communication protocols. Whatever sent this had technology far beyond current human capabilities. "Computer, run origin trace," she commanded, her fingers already moving across the tablet's surface. The response was immediate and puzzling. Message origin: Krylea Prime. Species designation: Krylean. Technology level: Category 5. Sarah whistled softly. The Kryleans were among the most advanced species in known space. They had achieved interstellar travel while humans were still figuring out steam power. The idea that they needed human help with anything was almost laughable. A second message appeared: Your species possesses unique qualities. Time critical. Millions of lives at risk. Sarah's workshop suddenly felt very small. She built her reputation on fixing the unfixable, on understanding machinery that others had given up on. But this was different. The Kryleans had entire planets dedicated to research and development. Their automated repair systems were legendary. What exactly needs fixing? She typed back, curiosity overriding caution. The response came with a burst of data that made her tablet screen flicker. Technical specifications began scrolling past, showing something massive, ancient, and terrifyingly complex. It was a planetary defense system, but unlike anything in current use. The technology seemed to combine organic and mechanical components in ways that defied conventional engineering. System designation: Guardian. Status: Critical failure imminent. Previous repair attempts: 47. All failed. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she studied the specifications. The system's core programming was unlike anything she'd ever encountered. It seemed to operate on principles that bordered on the organic, almost as if it were alive. Her comm unit chirped, and Dr. Marcus Wade's holographic image appeared above her workbench. The station's chief of security looked concerned. "Chen, we're picking up unauthorized communications from your section. Care to explain?" "I just received a job offer," Sarah replied, still scrolling through the data. "From the Kryleans." Marcus's image flickered as he processed this information. "The Kryleans? That's impossible. They haven't made direct contact with humans in over 50 years. They consider us, what was the term? Developmentally incomplete. Well, apparently we've completed enough development to be useful." Sarah highlighted a section of the specifications. "They've got some kind of ancient defense system that's failing. They've tried to fix it 47 times. And they think you can succeed where they failed." Marcus's skepticism was clear. "Sarah, this feels wrong. The Kryleans don't ask for help, especially not from humans." A third message appeared: time remaining before critical failure: 72 standard hours. Projected casualties if failure occurs: 23.7 million sentient beings. Sarah felt the weight of those numbers settle onto her shoulders. She'd spent her life fixing things, understanding the souls of machines that others saw as mere assemblies of parts. Whatever this guardian system was, it was calling out for help in its own way. They're not asking for help because they want to, she realized aloud. They're asking because they have no choice. Marcus's hologram stepped closer, his expression grave. "This isn't some broken-down terraforming unit, Sarah. This is Krylean technology. If something goes wrong, if something goes wrong, millions die. Sarah straightened up, decision made. I've never lost a machine yet, Marcus. I'm not about to start now. The final message appeared with coordinates and transportation arrangements. A Krylian ship would arrive within the hour. Computer, begin workshop shutdown sequence, Sarah commanded, and download all available data on Krylian technology and culture. As her systems hummed into standby mode, Sarah packed her tools with methodical precision. Each one was a familiar friend, tested and trusted through countless repairs. But this time, they'd be facing something entirely new. I hope you know what you're doing, Marcus said softly before his hologram flickered out. Sarah looked at the encrypted message one last time, its alien characters still shifting and changing like living things. So do I, she whispered. But beneath the uncertainty, she felt a familiar excitement building. This was what she lived for, the challenge of understanding, of fixing, of making things right. Whatever this guardian system was, whatever had gone wrong with it, she would find a way to understand it. Because that's what humans did best. They looked at the impossible, rolled up their sleeves, and got to work. The Krylian ship was beautiful in its alienness, all sweeping curves and iridescent surfaces that seemed to shift color with each passing moment. But Sarah barely noticed as she followed her escort, Ambassador Vex, through its crystalline corridors. Her attention was fixed on the datapad in her hands, studying the increasingly concerning readings from the Guardian system. The energy signatures are unlike anything in your database, Vex observed, his luminescent skin pulsing with shades of blue that Sarah had learned indicated anxiety. We believed we understood its principles when we inherited it from the predecessors, but now, inherited. Sarah looked up sharply. I thought this was Krylian technology. Vex's skin darkened momentarily. The Guardian system predates our civilization by several millennia. We became its caretakers when we achieved spaceflight, as did the species before us. It has protected this sector of space for longer than our combined histories. The implications made Sarah's head spin. She'd assumed she was dealing with advanced alien tech, not an artifact that predated known civilization. And it's never failed before. Never, Vex confirmed. Until 3 standard months ago, when it began exhibiting what we can only describe as erratic behavior. The ship emerged from hyperspace with a subtle ripple of displaced energy. Through the transparent hull, Sarah saw Krylia Prime, a jewel of a world wrapped in swirling bands of purple and gold. But it was the structure in orbit that took her breath away. Guardian was massive, a construct that dwarfed even the largest human space stations. Its form defied conventional geometry, with sections that seemed to fold into dimensions that shouldn't exist. At its heart, visible through gaps in its ever-shifting outer layers, pulsed a core of pure energy. Beautiful, isn't it? Vex's voice held a note of pride. Even after all these centuries, we've barely begun to understand its full capabilities. Sarah's engineering mind was already racing, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. Those patterns in its outer structure, they're changing. Yes, Guardian adapts its configuration constantly in response to potential threats, or at least it did. Vex's skin rippled with concern. Now the changes seem random, purposeless, and the energy readings from its core grow more unstable by the day. As their ship approached the docking platform, Sarah noticed something odd. The patterns in Guardian's structure weren't random at all. They were repeating in a complex but recognizable sequence. It reminded her of something, but she couldn't quite place it. The docking procedure was smooth and silent. As they stepped onto Guardian's surface, Sarah felt a subtle vibration through her boots, like a massive engine idling. But there was something else, a kind of presence that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. Our finest engineers have tried everything, Vex explained as they made their way to the control center. We've attempted to access its base programming, to bypass its security protocols, even to shut it down temporarily for diagnosis. Nothing works. It's as if Guardian is actively resisting our efforts. Sarah unclipped her diagnostic tablet and began taking readings. The data that flowed across her screen was fascinating and troubling. These energy patterns, they're not mechanical in nature. At least, not entirely. Explain, Vex demanded, his skin flushing orange with interest. They're too organic, too irregular. Sarah moved closer to a control panel, her fingers hovering over its shifting surface. It's almost like. Before she could complete the thought, the panel beneath her hands pulsed with light. Streams of data began flowing across every surface in the control room, too fast for even the Krylian systems to translate. But Sarah wasn't looking at the data. She was looking at the patterns they formed. "It's trying to communicate," she whispered. Vex's skin went almost white with shock. "Impossible. Guardian is a machine, a system. Advanced, yes, but not alive." Sarah's fingers traced the flowing patterns. "I'm not so sure about that. These sequences, they're not random or malfunctioning. They're language, a very old, very complex language." The patterns shifted again, and this time Sarah was certain. Guardian was responding to her touch, to her presence. But why? What made her different from the Krylian engineers who had tried to repair it? A new sequence appeared, one that made every Krylian in the control room step back in alarm. But to Sarah, it looked familiar, impossibly, incredibly familiar. "That's impossible," she breathed. "That's binary code. Ancient binary code, but definitely human in origin." Vex moved closer, his skin now pulsing with rapid shifts of color. "Human. But that would mean—" "Yeah," Sarah said, her mind racing with implications. "Either humans were here long before we thought we achieved spaceflight, or—" she paused, barely able to believe what she was about to suggest. "Or someone else was using our languages and programming methods long before we existed." The patterns around them shifted again, forming new sequences that seemed to reach out like tendrils of light. And in that moment, Sarah realized that fixing Guardian wouldn't be a matter of replacing parts or rewriting code. This was something far more complex and far more fascinating. She was going to have to communicate with it, understand it, and somehow figure out why an ancient machine was speaking in human code. "Ambassador," she said, not taking her eyes off the flowing patterns, "I'm going to need access to every historical record you have about Guardian, and about the predecessors who built it. Because somewhere in those records, Sarah was certain, lay the key to understanding why an ancient alien defense system was reaching out to a human mechanic from a distant space station, and why it seemed to recognize her in a way that defied all logical explanation. The mystery was deepening, and with it, the stakes. Guardian's core pulsed with increasing intensity, its energy readings becoming more erratic with each passing moment. They were running out of time. But for the first time since arriving, Sarah felt a glimmer of hope. Because if Guardian was truly trying to communicate, then maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to save it, and the millions of lives depending on it. The Krylian archives were housed in a crystalline chamber deep within Guardian's structure. Holographic displays flickered with countless records spanning millennia, but Sarah barely noticed their beauty. Her attention was fixed on a particular sequence of code that kept repeating in Guardian's communications, a pattern that shouldn't exist. "Look at this," she said, highlighting the sequence for Vex. "This isn't just binary code. It's a specific type of programming language developed by the Turing Institute on Earth. Except," she paused, double-checking her findings, "except it predates the Institute by at least 10,000 years." Vex's skin rippled with shades of deep purple, confusion. Sarah had learned. "Could your people have developed this language before, lost it, and then rediscovered it?" "That's what I thought at first." Sarah pulled up another display, this one showing Guardian's core architecture. "But look here. These pathways, these neural networks, they're designed to mimic human brain patterns. Not alien ones, specifically human." The implications were staggering. Either humanity's history was wrong, or— A sudden pulse of energy swept through the chamber, causing the holographic displays to flicker. Guardian's presence felt stronger here, more focused. The streams of code around them began forming new patterns, more complex than before. It's responding to our discussion, Sarah realized. She touched one of the floating sequences, and it expanded into a full three-dimensional display. What she saw made her breath catch. The display showed figures working on Guardian's construction, figures that were unmistakably human. "That's impossible," Vex whispered, his skin now almost translucent with shock. "The predecessors, they were human." Before Sarah could respond, Guardian's code shifted again. Images began flowing around them, humans in advanced spacesuits, working alongside beings of pure energy, building something vast and wonderful. But there was something else in the images, something that made Sarah's engineering instincts tingle. They weren't just building a defense system, she said slowly, watching the ancient scene unfold. They were building a bridge. The images showed an elaborate ceremony. The human engineers were connecting themselves to Guardian through neural interfaces, transferring something into its core. Not just data, consciousness. They made it alive, Sarah breathed. They gave it part of themselves. Vex moved closer to the display, his scientific curiosity overcoming his shock. But why? And why did they leave? The next sequence of images answered his question, though Sarah wished it hadn't. A massive energy wave was approaching the sector, some kind of cosmic catastrophe. The humans were working frantically, racing against time. They couldn't survive it, Sarah realized. Whatever that wave was, it was going to destroy all organic life in the sector. So she swallowed hard. They transferred their consciousness into Guardian. Not all of it, just enough to keep their knowledge alive, to protect whatever life would evolve after the wave passed. Guardian's core pulsed again, and this time Sarah felt something. A deep, profound sense of loneliness that brought tears to her eyes. The machine wasn't malfunctioning. It was remembering. "That's why it responded to me," she said softly. "It recognizes human patterns, human thought processes. It's been waiting for us to return, waiting for someone who could understand." But understanding brought new problems. The energy readings from Guardian's core were becoming more erratic, more dangerous. The human consciousness fragments embedded in its systems were destabilizing, torn between their original programming and 10,000 years of isolation. "It's not just a machine that needs fixing," Sarah said, turning to Vex. "It's a bridge between what humanity was and what we've become. And right now, that bridge is collapsing." She pulled up Guardian's core diagnostics again, looking at them with new understanding. The pattern she'd noticed before wasn't a malfunction. It was a cry for help, encoded in humanity's most basic language. "Ambassador," she said, her voice firm despite the enormity of what she was about to suggest. "I need direct neural access to Guardian's core systems." Vex's skin flashed with alarm. That would be incredibly dangerous. The energy levels alone could kill me, yes. Sarah's eyes were fixed on the flowing patterns of code, seeing now the pain and loneliness hidden within them. But Guardian isn't just a machine. It's part human, and it's been alone for 10,000 years, carrying the weight of an entire civilization's legacy. It needs more than repairs. It needs connection. The patterns around them shifted again, forming words in ancient binary. Remember, help, home. Sarah touched the flowing code gently. "We're here," she whispered. "We remember, and we're going to help you come home." But as she began preparing for the neural interface, new alarms began blaring throughout Guardian structure. The core's energy levels were spiking dangerously, and the protective fields were starting to fail. They were out of time. Whatever Sarah was going to do, she had to do it now, before Guardian's identity crisis triggered a catastrophe that would make the ancient cosmic wave look mild by comparison. The question was, could she forge a connection strong enough to bridge not just systems, but millennia? Could she help Guardian reconcile its ancient human elements with its role as protector of the present? The fate of millions hung on the answer, and Sarah had only one chance to get it right. The neural interface chamber was a sphere of pure energy, suspended in the heart of Guardian's core. Sarah stood before it, her heart pounding as the Krylian technicians attached the interface nodes to her temples. Each node pulsed with a soft blue light, sensing with her brainwaves. "The energy readings are beyond critical," Vex warned, his skin flickering between deep red and black, colors Sarah had never seen him display before. "If the core destabilizes while you're connected, then we all die anyway," Sarah finished. She checked her diagnostic tablet one last time. Guardian systems were approaching total collapse, the ancient human consciousness fragments creating cascading failures throughout its neural network. "At least this way we have a chance." The interface nodes hummed to life, and Sarah felt the first tentative connection with Guardian systems. It was like standing on the edge of an ocean of pure information, feeling the waves lap at her consciousness. "Remember," Vex said, "you have 20 minutes before the radiation levels become lethal." After that, Sarah nodded, her focus already shifting to the task ahead. Monitor the core stability. If it passes 90% degradation, evacuate the station. Don't wait for me. Before Vex could protest, Sarah stepped into the energy sphere. The connection was immediate and overwhelming. Guardian's consciousness rushed into her mind like a tidal wave, 10,000 years of memories, knowledge, and loneliness crashing against her thoughts. "Human, remember, help." The words weren't spoken or displayed. They simply existed in her mind, carrying with them a weight of emotion that nearly brought her to her knees. Sarah forced herself to focus, to push back against the flood of information. "I'm here," she fought back. "Show me what's wrong." Images flashed through her mind, the ancient engineers, their faces determined as they worked to save what they could before the cosmic wave hit. The transfer of consciousness, not just data but actual human awareness, preserved in Guardian systems. The long millennia of watching, waiting, protecting, alone. But there was something else, something Guardian was trying to show her. The human fragments weren't just memory storage. They were meant to evolve, to grow with each new civilization they protected. But isolation had frozen them in time, creating a paradox in Guardian's core programming. "You're not just remembering the past," Sarah realized. "You're stuck in it." The energy sphere pulsed in response, and Sarah felt Guardian's pain, the agony of being caught between what it was and what it was meant to become. The human consciousness fragments were fighting against their own programming, trying to preserve themselves exactly as they were, while Guardian's primary systems were attempting to evolve. Warning alarms blared through the chamber. Core degradation at 70%. Vex's voice seemed distant, unimportant compared to the connection she was forming with Guardian. Sarah pushed deeper into Guardian systems, following the streams of corrupted code to their source. The human fragments were beautiful in their complexity, each one a perfect snapshot of its donor's consciousness. But they were also primitive compared to modern neural mapping, unable to adapt without losing their original purpose. "You don't have to choose," Sarah thought, finally understanding. "You don't have to be either what you were or what you could be. You can be both." She began to work, using her understanding of both ancient and modern systems to create new pathways in Guardian's neural network. The human fragments wouldn't have to change. They could be preserved exactly as they were, living memories of humanity's past. But they could be connected to new systems, allowed to grow and learn without losing their essential nature. The pain in Sarah's head was becoming unbearable as radiation from the unstable core seeped through the protective fields. She could hear Vex shouting something about evacuation protocols, but she couldn't stop now. She was so close. Understand. Adapt. Grow. Guardian's consciousness shifted, beginning to flow through the new pathways Sarah had created. The human fragments remained intact, but now they were part of something larger, something that could evolve while honoring its origins. Core stabilizing. Someone shouted, energy levels dropping. But Sarah barely heard them. She was lost in the connection, feeling Guardian's joy as it finally bridged the gap between past and present. The ancient human consciousness fragments were no longer fighting their programming. They had become foundation stones for something new, something wonderful. The energy sphere began to fade, its color shifting from dangerous red to a calm, steady blue. Sarah felt Guardian's consciousness beginning to withdraw from her mind, but not before sharing one final message. Thank you. Not alone. Never alone. The neural interface dissolved, and Sarah collapsed into waiting arms. Through blurry eyes, she saw Vex's skin glowing with colors she'd never seen before. Joy and wonder, and something else, something uniquely Krylin. The core is stable, he reported, his voice filled with awe. Guardian's systems they're evolving, growing, but the original human elements remain intact. Sarah smiled weakly, her head still spinning from the neural connection. It just needed to remember that growth doesn't mean forgetting where you came from. Sometimes the oldest foundations can support the newest structures. Above them, Guardian's vast form hummed with renewed purpose, its ancient human heart now beating in harmony with its evolving consciousness. It was no longer just a relic of humanity's past or a protector of the present. It had become a bridge between what was and what could be. And as Sarah watched the patterns of light dance across its surface, she realized that she had done more than fix a machine. She had helped heal a wound in time itself, connecting humanity's forgotten past with its unlimited future. But there was still one more thing to do, one final bridge to build. Because now that Guardian could grow and adapt, it had the potential to be more than just a defensive system. It could be a teacher, a guide, a way for humanity to rediscover its own forgotten history. The question was, were they ready for what that history might reveal? 3 months after the crisis, Sarah stood in Guardian's newly constructed interface chamber, watching as teams of human and Krylian scientists worked side by side. The chamber was a marvel of collaborative engineering, combining Krylian crystalline technology with designs pulled from Guardian's ancient human archives. The neural pathways have fully stabilized, Vex reported, his skin shimmering with the deep gold of satisfaction. Guardian's consciousness has expanded beyond our highest projections, but the original human fragments remain perfectly preserved. Sarah nodded, running her hand along one of the interface panels. She could still feel Guardian's presence, but it was different now. No longer the desperate cry of a lonely consciousness, but the warm hum of a mind that had found its balance. And the historical archives? She asked, though she already knew the answer. Ever since Guardian had begun sharing its memories, the galaxy's understanding of human history had been transformed. Beyond remarkable. Vex gestured to a holographic display showing star charts marked with ancient human settlements. Your people achieved interstellar travel not once, but twice. The civilization that helped build Guardian was humanity's first attempt to reach the stars. When the cosmic wave forced them into hibernation, all that knowledge was lost. Until now. The display shifted, showing complex technological schematics that blended organic and mechanical principles in ways that modern science was only beginning to understand. They were so far ahead of where we are now, Sarah mused. But maybe that's not the point. Evolution requires suitabilities. Guardian's thoughts rippled through the interface. Growth comes from rebuilding. Sarah smiled. Guardian's way of communicating had evolved too, becoming more nuanced while maintaining the directness that marked its human origins. How are the new defense protocols working? In response, Guardian displayed a simulation of its updated defense network. The ancient system had been enhanced with modern innovations, creating a protective field that was both more efficient and more adaptable than ever before. But more importantly, it was no longer just a shield, it was a bridge. The first group of human students arrives next week, Vex said, his skin pulsing with excited patterns. The Krylian Council has approved the establishment of the Guardian Institute for Collaborative Studies. We'll be learning from each other, just as the ancient humans intended. Teaching, learning, growing, together. Sarah felt a surge of pride. The Institute had been her idea, a way to ensure that Guardian's knowledge would be shared and built upon, rather than simply preserved. Teams of human and Krylian researchers would work together, guided by Guardian's vast database of both ancient and evolving knowledge. A small alert flashed on her tablet. Another message from Harmony 7. Ever since the truth about Guardian had been revealed, her old repair shop had been flooded with requests. It seemed every station and colony in the sector wanted to understand the principles of human Krylian collaborative engineering. Still planning to go back? Vex asked, noting her attention to the message. Sarah hesitated, looking around the chamber that had become like a second home. Actually, I've been thinking about that. She pulled up a design she'd been working on. Plans for a mobile repair and research station that could travel between human and Krylian territories. Guardian's shown us that the best solutions come from bringing different perspectives together. Maybe it's time to take that show on the road. Niulu paths, Niulu connections, Niulu NND or a standing. Guardian's approval rippled through the interface, accompanied by a complex stream of technical suggestions for the mobile station's design. Sarah laughed. Even after everything, it was still, at heart, a problem solver. The real work is just beginning, she said, watching as another team of researchers entered the chamber. We're not just rebuilding forgotten technology. We're rebuilding connections between species, between past and present, between what we were and what we can become. Vex finished, his skin glowing with understanding. Above them, Guardian's vast form hummed with renewed purpose. Its surface rippled with patterns that combined ancient human binary code with Krylian crystalline matrices, creating something entirely new yet grounded in the wisdom of both cultures. Humanity or Etuarnans, Psyche-Ilko-Anti-Inuis, Growth BGNs. Sarah touched the interface panel one last time, feeling the warm pulse of Guardian's consciousness. The lonely machine she'd first encountered was now a thriving nexus of collaboration and discovery, proving that sometimes the greatest repairs aren't about fixing what's broken, but about building something new from the foundations of the past. Ready to see what else is out there? She asked Vex, pulling up the star charts showing unexplored regions of space. His skin rippled with anticipation. There are more ancient human outposts waiting to be discovered. More bridges to be built. Together, Guardian added. Always together. Sarah smiled, already planning their next adventure. Because that's what humans did best. They explored, they built, they connected. And now, with Guardian's help, they were doing it not just across space, but across time itself. The future was waiting, and this time, no one would face it alone.